There's a force inside you right now. You feel it in the restlessness at 3 a.m., in the creative surge that hits when you're supposed to be doing something else, in the magnetic pull towards certain people, certain projects, certain versions of yourself you haven't become yet. Most people spend their entire lives either suppressing this force or letting it control them. Carl Jung knew there was a third option, one that transforms everything. Picture this: Zurich, 1912. Jung sits in his study, surrounded by ancient texts and patient notes, watching his own professional world crumble around him. His break with Freud isn't just intellectual, it's visceral, personal, dangerous. Freud had reduced everything to sex, to the biological drive for reproduction. But Jung saw something else in his patients, in himself, in the dreams and symbols that kept appearing across cultures and centuries. He saw a power that could either destroy you or make you whole. What Jung discovered wasn't just psychology. It was a map to the most potent force in human consciousness, what he called libido, but not in the way you've heard it before. Not the crude, reductive version that reduces you to your impulses. This was something older, deeper, more dangerous, and more divine. This was the raw creative energy that builds civilizations and tears them down, that fuels both saints and artists, warriors and mystics. And here's what they don't tell you. Jung didn't just theorize about this. He developed specific, practical techniques to harness this energy. Techniques that have been buried in academic language, scattered across obscure texts, diluted by pop psychology until they're barely recognizable. While everyone else was talking about suppression or indulgence control or surrender, Jung mapped out a third path: transformation. Think about the people you know who seem to have it. That presence that fills a room. That creative output that seems impossible. That calm command of themselves and their circumstances. They're not suppressing anything. They're not indulging everything. They're doing something else entirely, something most people never learn because nobody teaches it. They're transmuting energy at the deepest level. This isn't about celibacy or tantra or any other extreme you've heard about. This is about understanding the engine that drives your entire psyche and learning to work with it instead of against it. Because right now, whether you know it or not, your sexual energy is already shaping your life. It's showing up in your work, your relationships, your sense of purpose or lack of it. The question isn't whether to engage with it. The question is whether you'll do it consciously or let it run you from the shadows. Jung believed and proved through decades of clinical work that when you learn to work with this energy properly, everything changes. Your creativity multiplies. Your presence intensifies. Your clarity sharpens. Not because you've added something to yourself, but because you've stopped leaking power in 1,000 unconscious directions. You've learned to channel the river instead of drowning in it. Let's get one thing clear from the start. When Jung talked about sexual energy, he was describing something far more expansive than what happens in a bedroom. This is where most people get lost, where the real power of his work gets buried under misunderstanding. Jung's concept of libido was revolutionary precisely because it broke free from the biological prison Freud had built around it. For Freud, libido was sexual energy in the literal, physical sense, the drive for sexual gratification that supposedly explained all human motivation. But Jung saw something else in his patients. He saw the same intense energy showing up in religious experiences, in artistic creation, in the drive to individuate and become whole. He saw monks who had channeled this force into mystical states. He saw artists who transformed it into masterpieces. He saw business people who poured it into building empires. Same energy, different expressions. Jung defined libido as psychic energy itself, the fundamental life force that animates consciousness. Sexual desire is one expression of it, yes, but it's not the source. The source is deeper. It's the energy that makes you want anything at all. The energy behind your ambition, your curiosity, your desire to grow and become. It's what the ancient Chinese called qi, what the Indians called prana, what mystics across traditions recognized as the divine spark in human form. Here's where it gets practical. This energy follows what Jung called the law of opposites and compensation. It naturally flows between polarities conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, creation and destruction. When you dam it up in one area, it floods another. When you try to eliminate it from your awareness, it erupts from the shadow. When you chase after it directly, it recedes. The key is understanding its nature well enough to work with its natural movement rather than against it. Jung observed that libido has 4 main characteristics that determine how it operates in your psyche. First, it's quantifiable. You have more or less of it at different times, and how much you have affects your entire psychological state. Second, it's transformable. It can be converted from one form to another, from sexual desire into creative work, from aggression into achievement. Third, it's symbolic. It expresses itself through images, dreams, and symbols that reveal its direction and purpose. Fourth, it's cyclical. It moves in patterns, rhythms, flows that you can learn to read and ride. This is radically different from the modern self-help approach that treats sexual energy like something you either release or retain, indulge or suppress. Jung saw it as something you dialogue with, something intelligent that speaks in the language of symbols and images. When you learn this language, you gain access to a guidance system more sophisticated than any conscious plan you could devise. The clinical evidence Jung gathered over decades showed something remarkable. Patients who learned to understand and work with their libido, who stopped fighting it and started transforming it, experienced profound shifts. Chronic anxiety would resolve, creative blocks would dissolve, relationship patterns would shift, not because they'd somehow eliminated desire, but because they'd learned to redirect its flow into channels that served their conscious aims while honoring its deeper nature. Jung made a crucial distinction that most people miss. There's a difference between repression and sublimation. Repression is when you shove the energy down, deny it, pretend it doesn't exist. That creates neurosis, shadow problems, eventual eruptions. Sublimation is when you consciously transform the energy into higher expressions, when raw sexual desire becomes creative fuel, when aggression becomes fierce compassion, when hunger becomes drive. One makes you sick. The other makes you powerful. The ancient alchemists, whose work Jung studied obsessively, called this process transmutation, turning lead into gold. They weren't talking about literal metals. They were encoding in symbol what Jung rediscovered through clinical practice. The human psyche has the capacity to take raw, primitive, instinctual energy and refine it into consciousness itself. Sexual energy is the raw material. Individuated consciousness is the gold. Now we go deeper to where Jung's work gets uncomfortable and most people turn away, because understanding sexual energy means confronting what Jung called the shadow, all the parts of yourself you've disowned, denied, or deemed unacceptable. And that's where the real power is hidden. Jung discovered something that terrified the psychological establishment of his time. Your sexual energy doesn't just express what you consciously desire, it also expresses everything you've repressed. Every inappropriate attraction, every unacceptable impulse, every aspect of your nature that didn't fit the persona you built to navigate the world, all of it lives in the shadow, and all of it is charged with libidinal energy. The more you suppress it, the more power it gains. Here's how it shows up in real life. You're inexplicably drawn to people who embody qualities you've rejected in yourself. You have repetitive sexual fantasies that confuse or shame you. You feel intense energy around certain taboos or transgressions, even if you'd never act on them. You experience creative blocks that feel like dammed up rivers. All of this is your shadow trying to communicate, trying to restore balance, trying to integrate what's been split off. Jung's concept of the anima in men and animus in women takes this deeper still. These are the contrasexual complexes in the psyche, the internal feminine in men, the internal masculine in women. And they're not just archetypes to study. They're living forces with their own intelligence, their own will, their own reservoir of energy. When these internal figures are unrecognized or undeveloped, your sexual energy gets projected outward in compulsive patterns. You chase in others what you've failed to integrate in yourself. This is why Jung insisted that real maturity requires withdrawing projections. As long as you're looking for your anima in actual women or your animus in actual men, expecting them to carry what you won't develop in yourself, your energy leaks constantly. You give your power away to every person who triggers that archetypal pattern. You become dependent on external sources for what should be an internal alchemy. The technique Jung developed for this is what he called active imagination, and this is where his work becomes genuinely revolutionary. Instead of just analyzing your dreams and fantasies, you engage them. You enter into dialogue with these shadow figures, these anima or animus figures. You let them speak. You ask them what they want. You negotiate with them. And in doing so, you reclaim the energy that's been locked in unconscious conflicts and projections. Let me be specific about how this works. Say you're a woman who finds herself repeatedly attracted to aggressive, domineering men, even though consciously you value partnership and equality. Traditional therapy might explore your father wound, your early conditioning. Important work, yes, but Jung would have you go further. He'd have you recognize that this attraction points to an undeveloped aspect of your own animus, your inner masculine strength, your capacity for directed will, your ability to take space and hold boundaries. The external attraction is a beacon, showing you where your work lies. Or imagine you're a man who feels compulsively driven to prove his sexual prowess, to accumulate conquests, to perform masculinity in increasingly hollow ways. Beneath that compulsion is usually an undeveloped anima, a rejected softness, receptivity, emotional depth. The sexual drive has become distorted because it's trying to fill a hole that only internal integration can address. The energy won't settle until the inner feminine is acknowledged and developed. Jung treated dozens of patients who came in with what appeared to be sexual problems, affairs, compulsions, dysfunction, confusion, and helped them see that the real issue was psychic fragmentation. Parts of themselves were at war. Energy that should flow in a unified direction was split among conflicting aims. The sexual symptoms were just the most visible battlefield. The shadow work isn't comfortable. It means admitting to desires and impulses you've spent years denying. It means seeing how your carefully constructed self-image is exactly that, a construction, a persona, not the totality of who you are. It means recognizing that some of what you've labeled as bad or wrong in yourself is actually raw energy waiting to be transformed and integrated. But here's the payoff Jung promised and delivered. When you do this work, when you face the shadow and integrate the contrasexual archetype, your energy consolidates. Instead of leaking in 12 directions through projections and compulsions, it becomes available for conscious direction. You stop being controlled by impulses you don't understand. You stop giving your power to people who represent what you won't claim. You become whole, and wholeness is power. Now, let's get to what you came for, the actual techniques. Because Jung wasn't just a theorist, he was a clinician who needed methods that produce results. These aren't New Age platitudes. These are specific practices he used with patients and refined over decades of work. Technique 1. Dream work as energy mapping. Jung believed dreams are the psyche's natural communication system, and sexual dreams especially reveal how your libido is moving beneath conscious awareness. The technique isn't just to interpret dreams, but to track patterns over time. Keep a dream journal specifically noting when sexual imagery appears and what else is happening in the dream. Is the sexual energy in your dreams flowing freely or blocked? Are you the active or passive participant? What symbols appear alongside the sexuality, water, fire, houses, animals? Jung taught that these symbols reveal where your energy wants to go. A dream of sex in a church might indicate energy moving towards spiritual concerns. Sex with a stranger could point to integrating unknown aspects of self. Sex with an ex might show energy still caught in past patterns. The practice. For 30 days, record every dream upon waking. Note sexual content without judgment. After 30 days, look for patterns. Where is your dream energy trying to take you that your waking life isn't allowing? What's being revealed about your true desires versus your conscious beliefs about what you should desire? Technique 2. Active imagination with your shadow. This is Jung's most powerful and most misunderstood technique. It's not meditation, it's not visualization. It's a waking dialogue with the unconscious that can fundamentally reshape your relationship with your own energy. Here's the practice. Sit in a quiet space. Close your eyes. Call up an image of someone who embodies the qualities or desires you most reject in yourself. Maybe it's a person you're attracted to for the wrong reasons. Maybe it's a figure from dreams. Maybe it's a version of yourself you fear becoming. Let this figure appear in your imagination as vividly as possible. Now, and this is crucial, don't just watch. Engage. Ask the figure questions. What do you want from me? What part of my energy do you carry? What happens if I keep rejecting you? And then listen. Let the figure respond in whatever way emerges. Sometimes it speaks. Sometimes it shows you images. Sometimes it transforms into something else. Jung did this practice regularly, even during his famous confrontation with the unconscious after his break with Freud. He dialogued with figures who terrified him, who represented everything he thought he wasn't. And by giving them space to speak instead of repressing them, he integrated their energy. What had been fragmenting became unifying. The key is consistency. 10 minutes daily is worth more than occasional long sessions. Over time, you'll notice something remarkable. The compulsive quality of certain desires lessens. Not because you've eliminated the desire, but because you've understood its message and integrated its energy. Technique 3. Symbolic rituals for conscious transmutation. Jung recognized that humans think in symbols, not just concepts. So he developed and borrowed ritual practices that help the psyche understand what you're doing when you're working with energy transformation. One powerful practice: create a personal symbol that represents your sexual energy at its highest potential. Maybe it's a drawing, a sculpture, a mandala, an object you find in nature. Place it somewhere you see daily. When you feel sexual energy arising, whether as desire, creativity, restlessness, or drive pause, look at your symbol. Consciously dedicate the energy to whatever it represents for you: your creative work, your growth, your purpose, your becoming. This isn't superstition. It's leveraging how the psyche actually works. The conscious act of dedication, performed with symbolic resonance, creates a pathway for energy to flow in the direction you choose. Over time, the pattern becomes automatic. Your nervous system learns the route. The energy transmutes more readily because you've trained your psyche in the alchemy. Technique 4. The practice of conscious containment versus conscious expression. Jung didn't advocate for permanent abstinence, but he did recognize that periods of conscious containment, holding sexual energy rather than releasing it, can produce powerful psychological effects. The key word is conscious. This isn't repression. This is a deliberate practice done with full awareness. The technique? Choose a specific period, say 2 weeks or a month, during which you consciously contain sexual energy. Notice what happens. Where does the energy want to go? What creative urges intensify? What emotional material surfaces? What dreams come? Then, equally important, choose a period of conscious expression where you allow sexual energy its full natural release. Again, notice, how does the energy move differently? What changes in your work, your presence, your relationships? The point isn't to choose one over the other permanently. The point is to develop conscious awareness of how the energy operates in both modes, so you can work with it intentionally rather than being run by unconscious patterns. If you're finding value in this, drop a comment below sharing which technique resonates most with you. And if you want to go deeper into Jungian practice, make sure you're subscribed, because we're just getting started. This is where everything Jung taught about sexual energy points, the process of individuation. This is the goal, the reason for learning these techniques, the transformation that makes all the work worthwhile. And it's something far more radical than most people realize. Individuation isn't self-improvement. It's not becoming a better version of the person you think you should be. It's becoming the person you actually are, the full, complete, integrated totality of your being, including all the parts you've been taught to reject. And sexual energy is the fuel for this journey. Jung defined individuation as the process by which a person becomes individual, meaning undivided, whole. It's the integration of consciousness and unconsciousness, ego and shadow, persona, and authentic self. When you individuate, you're no longer fragmenting your energy between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. All of you is available. All your energy flows in one direction, toward wholeness. Here's what this looks like in practice, based on Jung's case studies and his own journey. As you integrate shadow material and withdraw projections, you notice your energy stops being reactive. You're no longer triggered by what used to derail you. You're no longer compulsively drawn to people or situations that mirror your unintegrated aspects. The energy that was caught in those unconscious patterns becomes available for conscious purposes. Your creative output often increases dramatically. Jung noted this in patient after patient. When libido is no longer tied up in internal conflicts, it flows naturally into creative expression. Writers who were blocked suddenly produce. Artists who were derivative find their authentic voice. Entrepreneurs who were spinning their wheels suddenly gain traction. Not because they learned new skills, but because their energy was liberated from unconscious constraints. Your presence changes. People sense it even if they can't name it. There's a kind of integration, a wholeness that reads as charisma or authority or magnetism, but it's not performance. It's the opposite. It's the energy you stop wasting on performance becoming available to simply be. Jung was clear that individuation is rarely comfortable. It requires you to face what Carl Jung himself called the most difficult and dangerous of all tasks, meeting yourself as you actually are, not as you wish to be. It means confronting the inferior function, the aspect of your personality you've least developed. It means recognizing that your greatest gifts and your deepest wounds often share the same source. It means accepting that you contain multitudes, including contradictions that will never fully resolve. But here's the critical insight about sexual energy and individuation. As you do this work, as you integrate more of yourself, your relationship with your sexuality transforms. It becomes less compulsive and more conscious, less about seeking completion in another, and more about expressing wholeness from within, less about proving something and more about sharing something. Jung saw this pattern consistently. Individuating people experience a fundamental shift in how sexual energy operates in their lives. For some, sexuality becomes more free and expressive because it's no longer carrying the weight of unconscious needs. For others, the compulsive quality drops away and sexuality becomes more selective, more intentional. For many, there's a discovery that the energy they thought was sexual was actually spiritual or creative, and when redirected appropriately, it transforms their entire life trajectory. This isn't celibacy or repression. It's not asceticism or denial. It's the opposite. It's claiming your full erotic nature by understanding what it actually is. Eros, in the Greek sense Jung drew from, isn't just sexual desire, it's the life force itself, the drive toward connection, creation, union. When you individuate, you understand that your sexuality is one expression of this larger force, not the totality of it. The marker of progress in individuation, Jung taught, is the development of what he called the self, the archetype of wholeness and totality. When the self begins to emerge as the new center of the personality, replacing the ego, your energy naturally organizes around it. You stop fragmenting. You stop leaking. You become what you are always meant to be, a unified human being, fully embodied, fully conscious, fully alive. Practically speaking, you know you're individuating when your relationships become more authentic and less projective. Your work feels aligned with something deeper than ambition. You're less reactive to triggers that once controlled you. Your creative expression feels more natural and less forced. You experience synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that suggest your psyche is aligned with something larger. You feel less need to prove yourself and more capacity to be yourself. Your sexual energy feels integrated rather than split off. This is the promise Jung made and kept, that by understanding and working with your sexual energy as part of the larger individuation process, you don't just improve your life, you transform it at the deepest level. So where does this leave you? You've learned that your sexual energy is actually life force energy. You've seen how the shadow and the contrasexual archetypes carry energy that's meant to be integrated, not rejected. You've received specific techniques for working with this energy consciously. You've understood that the goal is individuation becoming whole. Now comes the most important question. What do you do with this knowledge? Jung was adamant that psychological knowledge means nothing without application. Understanding these concepts intellectually won't change your life. Only lived experience, only actual practice, only the daily work of engaging with your psyche will produce transformation. So, let's talk about what integration actually looks like in daily life. First, abandon the idea that this work has an endpoint. Individuation is a lifelong process. There is no moment when you've arrived, when you've integrated everything, when you've mastered your energy completely. What changes is your relationship with the process. You stop waiting to be fixed and start engaging with your ongoing becoming. Second, expect resistance. Your ego will fight this work because individuation threatens its dominance. Every time you integrate a shadow element, every time you withdraw a projection, every time you redirect your energy consciously instead of unconsciously, your ego loses a little control. It will manufacture doubts, distractions, urgencies. Recognize this as part of the process, not evidence that you're failing. Third, find your own rhythm. Jung's techniques aren't meant to be followed dogmatically. They're templates you adapt to your unique psyche. Maybe dream work resonates deeply for you, but active imagination feels forced. Maybe ritual practices unlock something while containment experiments don't. Honor your individuality even as you're individuating. Your psyche knows what it needs. Fourth, consider getting support. Jung himself underwent analysis and believes strongly that deep psychological work benefits from skilled guidance. Whether that's a Jungian analyst, a therapist trained in depth psychology, or a mentor who understands this work, having someone who can see what you can't, who can hold space for your process, who can challenge your self-deceptions is invaluable. This isn't weakness, this is wisdom. Fifth, practice patience with the pace of transformation. The psyche works on its own timeline, not your ego's schedule. You might do months of dream work before a major insight emerges. You might practice active imagination for weeks before the figure starts speaking back. You might contain sexual energy for a period and not feel the creative surge everyone talks about. Trust the process anyway. The psyche is always working beneath consciousness, always moving toward wholeness, even when you can't see progress. Sixth, watch for the signs that you're on the right path. Not dramatic revelations necessarily, but subtle shifts. You notice you're less judgmental of others because you're less at war with yourself. You find yourself attracted to different qualities in people than before. You experience bursts of creative energy that feel clean rather than manic. You sleep better, your relationships deepen, small synchronicities appear. These are the psyche's way of confirming you're aligned with your own nature. Seventh, remember that this work is fundamentally about power, but not power over others. It's power to be yourself, to direct your energy consciously, to create from wholeness rather than fragmentation, to live authentically rather than reactively. This is the power Jung believed was humanity's birthright and burden, the capacity for consciousness, for choice, for self-creation. Here's what Jung knew that most people never grasp. Your sexual energy isn't something to overcome or control or master in the dominating sense. It's something to understand, to dialogue with, to transform through conscious relationship. It's a force of nature within you, as real and powerful as gravity or electricity. You wouldn't try to eliminate gravity. You learn how it works and you build accordingly. Same with libido. Same with the life force that Jung spent his career mapping. The techniques he left us, dream work, active imagination, symbolic ritual, conscious containment. These aren't just interesting ideas. They're technologies of consciousness, refined through thousands of hours of clinical work with real people facing real struggles. They work if you work them. Start tonight. Journal your dreams for 30 days. Practice one Jung technique daily for a month. Subscribe and share this knowledge. Your life force is flowing. Meet it consciously or let shadows control you. The work begins now. Jung gave you the map. What you do next is your choice.